This is the most heavily guarded strip of land on Earth. A 4-kilometer wide no-man's land called the DMZ, where for 70 years, two armies have stood close enough to shout at each other. And in 2024, one of them started building a wall. That should make things calmer. A wall keeps enemies apart. But when North Korea began raising concrete barriers along the line, the side that grew nervous wasn't the North. It was the South. Its generals didn't relax. They started watching more closely. A wall is meant to make people feel safer. So why did this one make its neighbor more afraid? To understand that fear, you have to understand the line. The DMZ was drawn in 1953, at the end of the Korean War. Except the war never truly ended. There was no peace treaty, only a ceasefire. Technically, the two Koreas are still at war today. And despite the name, this zone is the opposite of demilitarized. It may be the most heavily armed border on the planet, layered with troops, fences, and an estimated 1 to 2 million landmines. So here is the strange part. For 70 years, this border has seen gunfights, commando raids, secret tunnels, deadly clashes, again and again. And yet, every single time, it stopped. It never tipped into another war. What stopped it? Not the empty land, something you couldn't see. Over the decades, the two sides had strung invisible safety wires across the divide. Military hotlines, agreements limiting what each army could do, roads and rail lines physically linking them, ways to pick up a phone and say, "That shot was an accident, stand down." For 70 years, those wires held. Then, starting in 2024, North Korea began cutting those wires. It blew up the roads and rail lines connecting it to the south. It walked away from the agreements that had limited its army. It declared that the two Koreas were no longer one people waiting to reunite, but two separate hostile states. And it began building the wall. Notice exactly what was destroyed. Not the buffer of empty land, that is still there. What vanished were the safety wires, the phones, the agreements, the roads back. And look at which way the wall faces. It is lined with fresh mines and stripped ground, not the design of an army about to charge forward, but of one sealing itself shut, keeping its own people from leaving, keeping outside information from getting in. There is one more thing the wall does, and it matters most. It is built to last. A hotline can be reconnected in an afternoon. A concrete wall, a demolished road, a formal declaration of enmity, those are meant to be permanent. Then, in 2025, South Korea elected a new president who wanted to reach back out to the north. It changed nothing. The line stayed frozen. For the first time in 70 years, a new government in Seoul could not thaw a thing. The cut had been made permanent. Which brings us back to the question, why would a country remove its own brakes? Why make the enemy permanent, especially now, when North Korea is straining inside its own borders, with markets it can no longer fully control and regions going hungry? Here is the answer. An outside enemy is what holds the inside together. When a government cannot feed every region, cannot deliver on its promises, cannot stop its own people from drifting away, a permanent enemy does something no policy can. It manufactures unity. It turns hardship into sacrifice and doubt into loyalty. We suffer, the story goes, because they are out there. And this is not only a northern habit. In the South, it has mostly been the conservative right that reaches for the same tool, because around elections, a jolt of tension can rally a base that is especially sensitive to national security and to the long memory of the war against communism. The difference is scale and permanence. For Seoul, it was occasional and always contested at the ballot box. For Pyongyang now, it is being poured into concrete. And there is a reason to lock the enemy in right now. For 70 years, North Korea's real enemy was never the South. It was the United States, with the South cast as America's puppet. But America is turning toward China and slowly stepping back from Korea. If the American villain leaves the stage, the story falls apart, because then the South is just family. So Pyongyang is rebuilding the enemy on new ground, not America's puppet, but a hostile state in its own right, one that will still be standing after the Americans are gone. So what happens next? The most likely future is not war. It is a frozen standoff that hardens into the new normal, the two Koreas drifting apart for good, the North leaning further toward Russia and China. But there is a second possibility, and it is the reason those generals grew nervous. A shot on the border, a drifting drone, a soldier defecting under fire. For 70 years, a small accident like that could be talked down. Now there is no phone to pick up. The wall is nearly finished. The brakes are gone. So the next time a shot rings out along that border, who is left to say, "Stand down"?